Dr. Sarah Chen stifled a yawn as she reviewed the evening's deep space readings of the Global Space Observatory. The massive radio telescope array had been picking up the usual cosmic background noise until 2347 when something changed. She blinked, leaned closer to her display, and adjusted her glasses. "This can't be right," she muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. The signal pattern displayed on her screen was unlike anything she'd encountered in her 15 years of astronomical research. It pulsed with an almost mathematical precision, yet contained variations that suggested intelligence rather than a natural phenomenon. The observatory's advanced AI flagged the signal as a potential Category 1 anomaly, but Sarah knew it was more than that. She reached for her phone to contact Dr. Rodriguez, her department head, when every screen in the facility suddenly flickered to life. Crystalline shapes emerged from what appeared to be tears in space itself, their surfaces catching and refracting sunlight like enormous diamonds. The vessels, and Sarah was certain they were vessels, arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern above Earth's atmosphere. The largest of them would have dwarfed Manhattan. "Everyone to the main conference room, now," Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Years of emergency drills kicked in as she initiated first contact protocols. Within minutes, screens worldwide displayed the same message. "Your world has something we need." The words appeared in every language simultaneously, the translation perfect but somehow lacking any warmth or humanity. The beings called themselves the Vaxari, and they had crossed countless light years with a single purpose. Earth's leaders scrambled to respond. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session, and military forces worldwide went on high alert. Sarah watched as diplomats attempted to establish peaceful dialogue with the Vaxari, their messages crafted carefully by teams of linguists and cultural experts. The aliens' response came swiftly and without warning. In less than 30 seconds, every satellite in Earth's orbit went dark. Global communications stuttered and failed as the backbone of modern telecommunications crumbled. The Vaxari had neutralized humanity's eyes in the sky, with the casual ease of someone swatting an insect. As panic began to spread, Sarah noticed something peculiar about the alien ships. Their protective barriers pulsed with a rhythmic pattern that tickled at her memory. She began recording the frequency variations, her mind already forming connections that would soon prove vital to Earth's survival. In the chaos of that first hour, as governments worldwide struggled to restore communications and maintain order, Dr. Sarah Chen made the first step toward humanity's salvation. She didn't know it yet, but her background in quantum physics, and more importantly, her childhood love of music, would provide the key to understanding these visitors from the stars. The Vaxari had come expecting to find primitives. Instead, they would discover that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. Dr. Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes as she studied the energy readings from the Vaxari ships. 3 days had passed since their arrival, and she hadn't left the underground facility that now served as humanity's primary research center. The surface of her desk was covered with empty coffee cups and discarded energy bar wrappers. Something about the shield frequencies nagged at her consciousness. The patterns seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place why. Frustrated, she pushed back from her desk and closed her eyes, letting her mind wander. The gentle hum of the laboratory equipment surrounded her, and suddenly, the connection clicked. "Back," she whispered, her eyes snapping open. "It's like back." Her fingers trembled as she pulled up the frequency analysis software. The shield harmonics, when mapped across a standard musical scale, followed patterns surprisingly similar to classical fugues. Each layer built upon the previous one, creating complex but mathematically precise interactions. Sarah reached for her phone, then remembered the Vaxari had disabled most communication systems. She grabbed her coat and rushed through the underground corridors to the quantum physics department. Dr. James Martinez had to see this. She found him hunched over his own set of readings, his silver hair disheveled. "James, look at this," she said, thrusting her tablet in front of him. The shield frequencies. They're musical. Martinez frowned, studying the data. Unlike most of his colleagues, he divided his time between quantum physics and conducting the city's symphony orchestra. These patterns, he murmured, they're following harmonic progression rules. But why would advanced aliens use musical theory in their shield design? Maybe they didn't know they were, Sarah replied, excitement building in her voice. What if it's a natural consequence of efficient energy distribution? The Vaxari might not even perceive these patterns the way we do. They spent the next hours converting shield frequencies into musical notation. Each ship's protective barrier sang its own part in a vast, cosmic symphony. The Vaxari had unknowingly created an orchestra of mathematical precision, but they lacked humanity's unique perspective to recognize it. Here, Martins pointed to a recurring sequence. This is like a chorus, repeating every 17 minutes. And these smaller variations, they're like grace notes in a composition. Sarah felt her heart racing. If we can understand the music, we might be able to predict the shield patterns. Maybe even influence them. Or disrupt them entirely. Martinez added quietly, the implications settling over them both. As if to underscore the urgency of their discovery, the building trembled slightly. Above ground, another Vaxari ship was landing, adding its own notes to the alien symphony. They had to work quickly. Earth's remaining military forces wouldn't be able to hold out much longer against the invaders' technological superiority. Sarah gathered her data and headed for the command center. They needed resources, and more importantly, they needed someone else who could see patterns in complex systems. She had heard rumors about a teenage gaming champion who had been brought to the facility. Perhaps it was time to expand their unconventional research team. Maya Wong sat cross-legged on a military cot, her fingers dancing across a tablet screen as she played yet another round of Rhythm Quest. The 16-year-old champion had been evacuated from the World Gaming Finals when the Vaxari arrived, and now found herself in a secret facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. A knock at her door broke her concentration. "Come in," she called, not looking up from her perfect combo streak. Dr. Sarah Chen entered, followed by Dr. Martinez and a tall man with silver dreadlocks who introduced himself as Richard Okonjo. Maya recognized Dr. Chen from the news. Before the aliens cut off all broadcasts. "We need your help," Sarah said, watching the complex patterns flowing across Maya's screen. "Those gaming reflexes of yours might be exactly what we're looking for." Maya paused her game, raising an eyebrow. "You want me to help fight aliens with video games? That's not how this works in real life." "Actually," Richard stepped forward, "it might be exactly how this works." The sound engineer pulled up a holographic display showing the Vaxari shield frequencies. These patterns, they're not random. They follow rules, like music, or like rhythm game patterns. Maya finished, her eyes widening as she studied the display. She stood up, moving closer to the hologram. These sequences, they're similar to level 87 of Rhythm Quest. See how they build and loop. Sarah and James exchanged excited glances. "Can you predict what comes next in the sequence?" Sarah asked. Maya's fingers traced the patterns in the air. If it follows standard rhythm game logic, the next peak should hit. There. She pointed, and seconds later, the energy spike appeared exactly where she had indicated. "Remarkable," James murmured. "Your pattern recognition skills from gaming have trained you to see exactly what we need." Richard pulled out his own tablet, overlaying sound wave analysis on the shield frequencies. "If we can predict the patterns, we can generate counter frequencies. It's like noise-canceling technology, but on a massive scale." The four of them gathered around a makeshift workstation, each bringing their unique perspective to the problem. Sarah's quantum physics expertise merged with James's musical theory, while Richard's sound engineering experience helped translate Maya's gaming intuition into practical applications. "The Vaxari would never expect this," Sarah said, watching Maya map shield frequencies to a modified version of her game interface. "They're looking for military threats, not a teenager with perfect rhythm. A distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. Another alien ship landing somewhere above. They were running out of time. Earth's remaining military forces were scattered, and the Vaxeri were establishing bases across the planet's surface. How quickly can we test this? Maya asked, her fingers already coding modifications to her game's interface. We'll need to start small, Richard replied. One frequency, one shield section. If we're wrong about this. We're not wrong, Maya interrupted, her eyes fixed on the patterns flowing across her screen. This is what I was born to do. I just never knew I was practicing to save the world. Maya's fingers flew across her modified gaming interface as streams of data flowed through the underground laboratory's displays. After 3 days of non-stop work, she had transformed her Rhythm Quest controller into something entirely new. The familiar game patterns now represented Vaxeri shield frequencies, each successful hit predicting the next sequence in their defensive matrix. Watch this section, she said, pointing to a recurring pattern. Every time their shields cycle, there's a micro-pause, like a breath between musical phrases. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her eyes tracking the data. Those pauses could be our window. How consistent are they? Down to the microsecond, Richard confirmed from his sound engineering station. The Vaxeri might be advanced, but they're almost too perfect. Their patterns never vary. Maya demonstrated by hitting a perfect sequence, predicting 5 shield oscillations in a row. The laboratory sensors confirmed each prediction with increasing precision. She had spent thousands of hours mastering rhythm games, but this was the first time her skills might determine the fate of humanity. We need to test it, Dr. Martins said, reviewing the simulation data. Something small, nothing that would alert their defensive systems. Sarah nodded, pulling up a map of nearby Vaxeri positions. There's a scout ship maintaining position over Denver. Its shields operate on the same principles as the larger vessels, just on a smaller scale. The team worked through the night, converting Maya's gaming interface into a precision targeting system. Richard's sound engineering expertise helped tune their transmitters to the exact frequencies needed, while Dr. Martinez composed what he called the counter melody, a precise series of energy pulses designed to interact with the alien shields. Ready for the first test, Maya announced, flexing her fingers. The modified game controller felt familiar in her hands, though the stakes had never been higher. Beginning sequence in 3, 2, 1. She executed a perfect combination, her muscles remembering patterns practiced countless times in competition. The laboratory's transmitter sent carefully calibrated pulses toward the Vaxeri scout ship. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then a tiny fluctuation appeared in the alien vessel's shield matrix. "Did you see that?" Sarah exclaimed, rushing to verify the sensor readings. The shield harmonics shifted exactly as predicted. The team held their breath, waiting to see if the aliens had noticed. The scout ship continued its patrol pattern, apparently unaware that humans had just cracked the first layer of their supposedly impenetrable defenses. "They don't recognize the intrusion pattern," Richard observed, studying the Vaxeri ship's response. "Their sensors are probably programmed to detect conventional weapons, not synchronized energy pulses." Maya saved the successful sequence data, already planning improvements. This is just like breaking through a game level's defenses. You start small, learn the patterns, then build up to the boss fight. "The boss fight," Sarah repeated quietly, looking at the massive Vaxeri command ship displayed on their tactical screens. "We'll need something much bigger to take on their main fleet." "Then we'll make it bigger," Maya replied, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Every game has a winning strategy. We just need to perfect ours before they realize we're playing." The modified radio telescope hummed to life as the team prepared for their first coordinated attack. After a week of refinements, Maya had perfected her timing on the shield disruption sequences. Richard's sound wave calculations promised a 3-second window of opportunity, if everything worked perfectly. "Primary transmitter aligned," Dr. Martins announced, his fingers dancing across the control panel. Frequency modulators are stable. Sarah checked the targeting data one final time. They had chosen a solitary Vaxari scout ship patrolling the outer edges of Denver's restricted zone. If something went wrong, the isolated target would give them the best chance of avoiding detection. "Remember," Richard cautioned, adjusting the final sound harmonics, "we only get one shot at surprising them. After this, they'll know something's up." Maya settled into her station, the modified game controller feeling like an extension of her hands. The familiar Rhythm Quest interface now displayed real-time shield frequencies instead of musical notes, but the principle remained the same: hit the right patterns at the right time. "Target is entering optimal range," Sarah reported. 30 seconds to maximum efficiency. The underground facility grew silent except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Every person in the room knew they were about to reveal humanity's first real defense against the invaders. Success would mean hope. Failure could alert the Vaxari to their vulnerability. "Beginning sequence," Maya announced, her voice steady despite the pressure. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, each movement corresponding to a specific shield frequency. On the main screen, waves of energy began building in perfect harmony. "Energy signature is stable," Richard confirmed. "Transmitting in 3, 2, 1. The modified radio telescope fired its carefully tuned pulse. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the impossible occurred. The scout ship's shields flickered and failed completely for 3 full seconds. "Direct hit," Sarah exclaimed, verifying the sensor data. Shield disruption exactly as predicted. The team's celebration was cut short by a burst of alien communications. Richard quickly patched the translated feed through their speakers. "Anomalous energy fluctuation detected in Sector 7. Possible solar interference. Increasing patrol radius to compensate." "They think it was a natural phenomenon," Martins whispered, hardly daring to believe their luck. "They're not even considering it could be an attack." Maya was already saving and analyzing the successful pattern data. "We can improve on this. The shield harmonics showed micro-variations we can exploit. Next time, we might get 5 seconds, maybe even 10. "We'll need it," Sarah said, pulling up images of the larger Vaxari vessels. The scout ship was perfect for testing, but the command ships will have layered defenses, multiple shield frequencies operating in concert. Like a boss battle with multiple phases, Maya nodded, understanding immediately. "We'll need to crack each layer in sequence." The facility's sensors suddenly registered increased activity above. The Vaxari were moving more ships into position around major cities. Whatever they were planning, it was clear they were entering a new phase of their invasion. "How quickly can we scale up the system?" Sarah asked, watching the alien ships gather. "Give me 48 hours, Maya replied, already modifying her interface. "I'm going to turn their perfect harmony into their biggest weakness." 2 weeks after their successful test, the underground facility had transformed into a global command center. Screens covered every wall, displaying data feeds from hidden installations worldwide. Each location represented what Dr. Martinez had begun calling Earth's Orchestra, a network of modified transmission stations disguised as broken communication equipment. "Sydney team is online," Richard announced, adding another green dot to their global map. "That makes 17 stations ready for synchronization." Sarah studied the distribution pattern, noting how each station had been positioned to create overlapping fields of influence. "The Vaxari still think we're trying to rebuild our communication network. Their patrol patterns haven't changed." Maya sat at her central station, now augmented with multiple displays showing shield frequencies from various alien ships. She had trained operators at each installation, teaching them to read the patterns as if they were playing the world's most important rhythm game. "London is reporting unusual activity," a technician called out. 3 more capital ships just entered their monitoring range. Dr. Martinez pulled up the sensor data, his expression grim. "They're gathering their fleet. Whatever they're planning, it's big." "Time for a test of the full network," Sarah decided. She turned to Maya. Are your teams ready? Maya nodded, pulling up the coordination interface she had designed. Each station has been practicing their individual parts. Now we see if they can play together. Richard initiated the countdown sequence. All stations, prepare for synchronized transmission. This is not a drill. Targeting minimal power, dispersion pattern alpha. Around the world, hidden transmitters powered up. Each one was individually too weak to pose a threat. But together, they formed something unprecedented, a global web of precisely tuned frequencies. Beginning sequence in 3, 2, 1. Maya's fingers flew across her controller, coordinating the worldwide effort. On the main screen, waves of energy began building in complex patterns, like ripples merging in a pond. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. Across the globe, Vaxari shield harmonics shifted slightly, responding to the gentle probe of Earth's first coordinated defense. Not enough to cause damage, but enough to prove the concept worked. All stations reporting successful synchronization, Richard confirmed, his voice tight with excitement. The network is stable. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Now we wait for their response. See if they noticed anything unusual. Hours passed as they monitored alien communications. The Vaxari continued their operations, apparently oblivious to the test that had just proved their shields could be affected on a global scale. They're still focusing on conventional threats, Martinez observed. Their sensors are scanning for missiles, energy weapons, military movements. They can't conceive of being attacked through music and mathematics. Maya saved the successful test data, already planning improvements. We'll need perfect coordination for the real thing. One missed beat could alert them before we're ready. Then we'll practice until it's perfect, Sarah replied, watching the alien ships continue their ominous gathering. Because something tells me we're running out of time to hit this right. The Vaxari made their move at dawn. Hundreds of ships across the globe began shifting into a new formation, their massive forms casting long shadows over Earth's cities. In the underground command center, alarms blared as sensors detected an enormous power buildup. Energy readings are off the charts, Richard announced, his fingers racing across his console. They're linking their ships into some kind of synchronized network. Sarah studied the patterns emerging on their displays. The alien vessels were arranging themselves in concentric circles around the planet, each ship connecting to its neighbors through visible beams of energy. They're creating a power distribution grid, she realized. But why? The answer came moments later as their translation software decoded a new Vaxari transmission. Begin final sequence. Planetary acquisition requires surface sterilization. They're going to try to make Earth uninhabitable, Maya said, her voice steady despite the horror of the revelation. But look at their shield patterns. They're all connected now. Every ship is part of the same network. Dr. Martinez's eyes widened as he understood. It's not just a weakness anymore. They've turned their entire fleet into one giant conductor. Sarah quickly pulled up their global defense grid status. All 23 hidden stations showed green, their operators standing by. This is what we've been waiting for. They've given us exactly what we need, a way to affect their entire fleet at once. But if we fail, Richard cautioned, they'll detect us immediately. We won't get a second chance. Maya was already adapting her control interface, accounting for the new patterns created by the linked alien ships. Their power grid follows the same mathematical principles as their shields. It's like they're about to perform their final symphony. Then we'll join in with our own composition, Martine said, helping Maya fine-tune the frequency calculations. Every ship they link to the network becomes another potential point of resonance. The command center erupted with activity as Sarah initiated their emergency protocols. All stations, this is Dr. Chen. Begin final preparations. Authorization code Alpha 7 Delta. Around the world, hidden transmitters powered up to full capacity. Each operator took their position, ready to play their part in humanity's desperate counterattack. Years of gaming tournaments had prepared Maya for this moment. The ultimate boss battle with no reset button. Vaxeri energy buildup at 60%, Richard reported. Their weapon will be ready in less than 30 minutes. Sarah looked at her team. A teenage gamer, a sound engineer, a conductor, and herself, a quantum physicist. An unlikely group of heroes about to attempt the impossible. Begin synchronization sequence, she ordered. Maya, you have command of the network. Everyone else, stand by to adapt to whatever they throw at us. Maya's fingers hovered over her controller as she watched the alien energy patterns build. At least we know one thing, she said with a slight smile. They're never going to see this coming. Maya took a deep breath as she watched the Vaxeri energy readings climb past 80%. The alien ships hung in perfect formation above Earth, their linked power grid creating beautiful but terrifying patterns across her display. All stations report ready, Richard announced, his voice tense but controlled. Synchronized transmission systems are locked in. Dr. Martinez stood behind Maya, watching the shield harmonics flow across her screen like notes on a musical staff. Remember, the sequence has to be perfect. One missed beat, and the whole thing falls apart. No pressure, Maya whispered, managing a small smile. She had won 3 world gaming championships, but this was the first time her skills might save an entire planet. Vaxeri weapon charging at 90%, Sarah reported. Beginning final countdown. Maya, you have control. Maya's fingers moved across her controller with practiced precision. Around the world, hidden transmitters activated in sequence, each one contributing its own note to Earth's defensive symphony. The first wave of energy pulses rose from the planet's surface, perfectly timed to match the aliens' shield frequencies. Initial contact in 3, 2, 1. Richard counted down. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The Vaxeri energy grid flickered as Earth's carefully tuned frequencies interfered with their shields. Confusion spread through the alien fleet as their perfectly synchronized network began experiencing unexpected harmonics. They're trying to compensate, Sarah called out, watching the alien responses. But they can't adjust without breaking their power distribution sequence. Maya's fingers danced faster, adapting to each Vaxeri attempt to stabilize their shields. Every evasive pattern they tried only created new vulnerabilities in their linked network. Their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. Energy cascade beginning in their secondary ships, Richard reported excitedly. The disruption is spreading through their entire fleet. Through their monitors, they watched as ship after ship experience shield failures. The Vaxeri's weapon charge began to falter as their power grid destabilized. Their perfect formation broke apart as individual vessels tried to escape the spreading dysfunction. They're realizing what's happening, Martinez observed, but they can't stop it without shutting down their entire network. Maya executed the final sequence of her pattern, timing it perfectly with the global network of transmitters. The resulting energy wave swept through the alien fleet like a crescendo in a grand symphony. Shield systems failed across hundreds of ships simultaneously. A transmission burst from the Vaxeri command ship, their usual precise language replaced with something approaching panic. Retreat protocol initiated. Earth sector marked as hazard zone. Warning to all future expeditions. Indigenous species possesses unknown defense capabilities. The alien ships began disappearing into hyperspace, their once perfect formation now in chaos. Within minutes, Earth's skies were clear for the first time in weeks. The underground command center erupted in cheers. Maya sat back in her chair, finally letting her hands relax. Game over, she said quietly. Sarah placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. No, this is just the beginning. The Vaxeri will spread the word about Earth. We're not just survivors now. We're the species that turned music and mathematics into a defense that even they couldn't overcome. And we did it without firing a single shot. Martinez added proudly. We just showed them a different way to look at the universe. Maya smiled, already thinking about how their discovery could be developed further. Maybe next time, we can teach them to dance.